I promised you guys that I'd do it. These are the fights to make after UFC 310. We'll start with Ian Garry, who lost to Shavkat but did pretty damn good. And I think everybody's wondering what's next for Garry. I think him versus none other than Colby Covington is a perfect scenario. Of course, the stipulation is Colby has got to get past Joaquin Buckley on Saturday, and that's a tall task. But I still see it as a winnable fight because if you know anything about Buckley, at welterweight, he's never beaten a good wrestler, especially in the UFC. I mean, the only good wrestler that he faced was outside of the UFC, and he got wrecked against Logan Storley. I feel like as much as Buckley's getting hyped up as an absolute phenom right now with big power, and I think everybody's kind of fading Colby for the most part. At plus 200, the odds are crazy for a 50-50 fight, and I don't think it's insane to fathom Colby Covington winning a unanimous decision and then calling out Ian Garry after. I'll say this. I think that the Colby Covington win over Buckley just leads him into the Garry fight. Before Ian Garry fought against Shavkat, Colby had said that Ian Garry doesn't have the stock to even deserve a fight against him. But I think as close as he was in a number one contender fight against the literal boogeyman in Shavkat, this has to be something the UFC is very much in favor of. But of course, there's a step in front of this fight happening. It's not like Colby isn't booked and we're like, yo, let's make this for March. He's got to beat Buckley, and Buckley's dangerous with big power in his hands. If, this fight isn't the one because Colby takes an L, I kind of doubt the UFC will book it. Granted, it wouldn't be insane if they did, but who knows if Colby sticks around after a loss to Buckley. If he did lose, then maybe we're seeing Ian Garry end up fighting somebody like Leon Edwards, because I could definitely see that as a stylistic matchup to watch. But himself, Ian Garry said it, he is not planning on fighting in February in England to take on Leon. He said if he's going to Europe, he wants to be fighting in Ireland, Dublin, Ireland, to be specific. Can you imagine a crazy scenario where the UFC goes back to Dublin and we have fight night main event, Ian Garry versus Colby Covington? That'd be a crazy fight. I hope that the stars align and we can make this happen. I think in a perfect world, you have Ian Garry and Colby Covington, and then you have Michael Chandler and McGregor actually happen. That's like a pure casual take, maybe to some, but let's be real. That's a major pay per view. That would be a huge banger. They could do that in Ireland. I doubt they would. It would be kind of cool for the Irish fans. They haven't had a fight there in a long time for the UFC. I think Ian Garry versus Colby Covington is kind of a must-make fight if the stars align. Because if you have them fight someone else, who knows if this thing ever happens. There's been so much trash talk between these guys that I just think they have to settle it in the cage, assuming that Colby beats Buckley, right? Even though Garry is coming off of a loss to Shavkat. It's a competitive decision loss to the number one contender in a short notice fight. Whereas Colby, regardless if he's taking on short notice or not, losing to Buckley is literally going to deflate the tires of Colby Covington's hype altogether. Hopefully this happens. I think this is what's next for Garry. Let's go with Garry versus Covington as the dream scenario. Let's keep on running. I will matchmake for Shavkat now because I think we got to bring him up. And you already know. Do we have to go in detail? He's taking on Balalov Muhammadov. You know what I'm saying? There he is with his signature haircut. I think that Shavkat and Balal is the fight that the UFC is going to do. I mean, they already faced off in the damn octagon. Are they not going to follow through? Yes, you're going to see this fight. I feel like this is like the most obvious pick of all the fights to make next that I'm doing here. If you disagree with this, you are probably out of your mind. The only way this fight doesn't happen is if Shavkat has an extended layoff forthcoming. They're claiming now Shavkat had a torn MCL in the lead up to the fight against Ian Garry. I don't know. I don't know. It's like, when a big up and coming star has an underwhelming performance, let's use the injury excuse. I feel like if the MCL tear is legit, then maybe Shavkat needs an extended layoff and then this fight doesn't happen. But assuming they're both healthy enough and ready to go in the next few months, they have to rebook this. They were supposed to fight Saturday. Let's see what happens. I honestly have a hard time favoring Shavkat. Bilal's a really tough stylistic matchup, man. And I mean, with his signature haircut, too, I think he's essentially unbeatable. So Shavkat versus Bilal, unless some catastrophic injury and a recovery period that's substantial. I mean, shit, if that happens, then we might be seeing Bilal versus Usman, which would just be strange. Let's keep running. Next one, Alexandre Pantoja. Our main event winner didn't get the first up treatment. Is that me disrespecting the newly claimed flyweight GOAT by many? Somehow Pantoja has become the flyweight GOAT now. I don't really think that he is. I think that's Mighty Mouse forever, but I feel like Pantoja is definitely a nasty fighter. He's up there as far as best flyweights of all times go, for sure. And if you look at who he hasn't fought in that top four, it's Kai Kara France. That's the matchup. You can say, but Kai's 1-2 in his last three. Okay, the fight before last, he lost a controversial decision against Amir Albazi. And then the fight after it, he made easy work of Steve Erceg, who gave Pantoja a legit run for his money. Like, as good as Pantoja looked against Kai Asakura, I feel like everybody's forgetting how Steve Erceg, who many will say didn't deserve the title shot, he didn't, gave him a tough fight. Let's forget about that. Did that not happen? That's completely forgotten about. And Kai Kara France made easy work of Steve Erceg, so why not? Pantoja versus Kai Kara France. Okay, yeah, he's not on a long win streak. He's literally been in the flyweight division forever. These guys were on the same season of The Ultimate Fighter against one another, and it's the only fighter in that top three that Pantoja hasn't already beaten multiple times. So I feel like unless they're going to do Kai Asakura versus Pantoja 2 immediate rematch, or are we going to do Royval versus Pantoja 3? I doubt it. Are we going to do Pantoja versus Moreno 4? Probably not. Who else really is there? You're not going to give Asu Almabayev a title shot yet. They're not going to give Josh Van a shot at the belt. Are we going to bring in somebody else from Ryzen again? I saw some people talking about Davis and Figueiredo. I don't even think Figgy can make 125. I'll say this. If Figueiredo can make 125 and he's willing to drop back down and weight, yes, that fight supersedes this, but it's a huge what if, because I really don't know if Davison Figueiredo can even cut to 125 anymore. He looked rough the last time against Moreno on the scale, and I feel like he's become a full-fledged bantamweight. So I don't know what's going to happen with Pantoja after, kind of clearing out the top caliber of the weight class. And the UFC was hoping Tatsuro Taira would have beat Royval, and then that would have been the obvious next fight. That'd be an easy fight to book. Because that didn't happen, I have to go with who's in the rankings right now. And I think Kai Kara France versus Pantoja is actually a cool fight because Kara France has legit knockout power. You look at, the fighters that Pantoja has beaten on this current title run, not saying that they didn't have power. Kai Asakura is dangerous on the feet for sure, but I think Kai Kara France has a different type of punching power. He's a true flyweight knockout artist, which is a pretty rare thing. Of course, Pantoja will have a massive grappling advantage, but let's book this fight. I think I'm ready to see it. If Davison Figueiredo cannot make 125, which I don't know if he can, I don't think he can, but shit, for the right paycheck, I'm sure he'd give it a go. If that's not going to happen, though, I think it's Kai Kara France. Now, obviously, if Davison Figueiredo says he's dropping in weight, Kai, you're on a one-fight win streak. He's jumping the line in front of you and fighting for the belt again. So, very much a 50-50 spot for Kara France. If it's who's in the top 15 right now, it's definitely him. If it's not, then yes, I could see a world where, we get Figgy back down and we do that fight. And honestly, it'd be a cool rematch. And if Pantoja beats Davison Figueiredo, that's a pretty strong claim for this GOAT flyweight status. I think under Mighty Mouse, though, of course. But still, top 3 GOATs as far as the flyweight division goes if Pantoja beats Figueiredo. If he doesn't and he beats Kai Kara France, I mean, he's still in the argument. But, legacy-wise, the Figgy fight's bigger. It's just, I don't know if Figgy can make that weight. I don't know if that's just a pipe dream. If he's willing, though, let's book that fight instead. But, for what we see, it's Kai Kara France on the table. Next up, Kai Asakura. Who should he fight in his sophomore UFC appearance? I think that some people might love the idea of him fighting Josh Van. And as cool as that is, I do not think that losing a title fight, then you fight a guy who just entered the rankings for a first time. It's probably the fight between Erceg and him. Let's do Kai Kara France. I'm thinking of Kai Kara France still. Let's see if Steve Erceg can avenge the loss against the Kai. This time we give him Kai Asakura. we're literally doing no favors to Steve Erceg, but I'm not going to be shocked if this fight comes to fruition. I just feel like, what else are we going to do? Are we going to do Tatsuru Taira versus Asakura? I just feel like that could be weird. Both guys Japanese, so that would kind of make sense, but it's not like Asakura has strong footing at 125 pounds. And to be fair, outside of, giving Pantoja a 5-round fight, Steve Erceg, coming off of a first round loss, doesn't have a lot of footing in that top 7, top 8 either. And I think him and Kai Asakura is an interesting matchup because we get to see Asakura then tested against a true rank contender, but not a top 3 guy in the world. Like, are they going to go now? Asakura fights Royval. Asakura fights Moreno. I don't think so. Honestly, I think Moreno and Royval might be throwing down in a trilogy. And then it'd be hard to deny either one of them a title shot, regardless of how many times Pantoja's beaten them. I like Kai Asakura versus I'm thinking Matt Schnell. My God. I'm so sorry, Steve Erceg. I'm disrespecting you. I'm calling you multiple different names, bro. We called him Kai Kara France. Now we called him Matt Schnell. We usually call him Mike Finch. We're going with Steve Erceg and Kai. And I think there's a chance that this could actually happen in Australia. But, it might be a bit of a pipe dream. I just think that Asakura didn't take a ton of damage against Pantoja, and I feel like he's going to want to make a relatively quick turnaround. Now, it's very dependent upon this UFC and Ryzen potential partnership, because if that is the case, we could see Asakura probably shelved for the next 6 months until the UFC sets something up to go to Japan. And I don't think they make it to Japan before April, so it could be 5 months of waiting for Asakura's next fight. But if there's not something in the works to take it to Japan, I think that maybe this fight happens sooner than later, and we see Asakura versus Matt Schnell in Australia. I think that would be kind of cool. I'm not going to bet my house on that happening, but I actually like this matchup for both men, because Kai Asakura with a big power advantage, I would say, but Schnell, pretty crafty guy, looking to get back on track. I'm doing him no favors, and I called him Matt Schnell again. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Steve Erceg. He does look kind of like Matt Schnell in this picture, though. It's because I flipped it, right? I had to, invert the pic to make it look right. He looks like Matt Schnell when you flip him horizontally. Okay, that's exactly what's going on. Let's go Kai Asakura versus fucking Matt Schnell. Let's keep running, all right? Next fight, we got Ciryl Gane. Okay, I don't even want to go too in-depth with this one. It was a robbery. They should be 1-1 against each other. Let's just book the rematch. Like, why are we messing around with anything else? Why? What's the point? Why are we going to do Ciryl Gane versus Jailton Almeida? He's probably going to get choked out. Volkov, he's going to have to fight backwards. What's he going to fight? The loser of Pavlovich and Rosenstruik, 2 guys he has wins over? Is Ciryl Gane going to fight the winner of Rosenstruik, Pavlovich? Maybe. Or do we just do justice by Volkov and we put him in a 5-round fight against Ciryl Gane? Because there's no way Volkov is fighting for a belt next. You might be able to give it to Ciryl Gane for, an interim or vacant belt against Aspinall. Probably a vacant belt. If Jones doesn't fight Aspinall, Gane versus Aspinall for the vacant belt might be something the UFC could do, but fans are not going to forget this potential, black eye as far as that matchup, because it seemed like a robbery, bro. I was a Ciryl Gane backer. I picked him. He was part of the Lock City parlay, but bro, I thought he lost 2 rounds to 1. I was surprised to see him get his hand raised at the end of it. So I think we got to do right by Volkov, and I'll actually request that the UFC runs this trilogy as a 5-round fight. Now, of course, being that Volkov is down 0-2 against Gane, maybe they don't do it, but it was an awful decision between 2 guys that are like 1 fight away from a title shot, and there's really not a clear path to the belt as far as the top end. So why not just rinse and repeat it, and let's do it for a 5-rounder, and let's make it a true #1 contender fight. If Ciryl Gane wins, great. Ciryl Gane proves that he can beat Volkov this time. Now he's got something to gain, because I don't think he won the last one. And if Volkov wins a second time, now in a sense, it feels as though he's won the series against Ciryl Gane. So let's just do the trilogy. Second fight's a robbery. Volkov won it. First fight, Gane won. I think it's a fair trilogy for a situation where somebody has 2 wins over the other. Let's not get into the stupid logistics of that too much, because I think looking at the fight, what happened in the octagon, Volkov won. Dana White told him after that was an awful decision and they'll do right by him. Well, maybe do right by him by just booking the immediate rematch and doing it as a 5-round fight. Can you imagine there was more time? I think Volkov would have done better. He clearly won the 3rd round. I don't know. Sorogan looks like he's getting worse as fights go on. I think they got to run it back. And I think 5 rounds is a necessary evil here. All right, next up, we're going to do Thug Nasty, the king of Flat Earth. I guess technically the Flat Earth champion because he beat fellow Flat Earther Kron Gracie. I like Bryce Mitchell a lot, even though, he says things that may be considered by some outlandish. I respect Bryce Mitchell. And, I'll look into it a bit more because of Bryce. I love watching Bryce Mitchell interviews. And I think that you just got to do the fight between him and Doo Ho Choi. Choi called him out. Bryce Mitchell accepted. Why not just book them against each other? What's funny is the call out that Choi did. He had a picture of the sphere of Earth as a globe, as opposed to the flat Earth. And I thought it was funny. Bryce Mitchell replied, "Yeah, it's CGI," and then said, "Yeah, I'm down. Let's fight." So let's just make this happen. It's a cool style matchup too. Choi, obviously dangerous striker, but actually showed some good grappling this past weekend. Both guys fought, within 30 minutes of one another. The first fight on the main card, Choi Landwehr, and then second fight on the main card, you had Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. I think the timelines are going to work out really well for these two, and I'm kind of curious to see what would happen. Choi definitely should get a chance to fight someone in the top 15, and the fact that Bryce Mitchell said yes, why look elsewhere? Fight the guy who's down to fight. Let's just book that. He said, we'll go. We'll make it happen. Bryce Mitchell has no issue fighting backwards and defending his spot, which is something you got to respect about him. He's not like, oh, well, you're not ranked, I'm not fighting you. It's like, no, I'm a fighter. I'm in the top 15. I'll prove that I'm that good. And that's why I love Bryce Mitchell, and you should too. And I love Choi as well because his style is absolutely sick. Now, a fight that I really want to see still, regardless of what happens between these two, Doo Ho Choi and Dan Ige is a banger. I honestly think that though Bryce Mitchell is very willing to fight Choi, there's a light whisper in the ear, and I guarantee you somebody in that UFC matchmaker war room on Tuesdays is going to bring a bit of an argument towards doing towards doing Doo Ho Choi versus Ige as opposed to Bryce Mitchell, and I can see a very powerful argument. It's just the fact that both guys have already accepted this fight should be easier to set up and maybe quicker to set up too. But Doo Ho Choi and Dan Ige would be crazy. So it's an either or type situation. Then I have an alternate for Bryce Mitchell as well. I like doing alternates because there's always somebody else. Bryce Mitchell versus Aljamain Sterling would be kind of cool. Don't tell me you wouldn't like that. I think Aljo give him a lot of trouble. I don't hate that fight at all. That's a possibility too. But I think realistic outcome, both guys willing to fight each other. Let's go Choi versus Thug Nasty. Now, I'm going to give Kron Gracie a matchup. He may have looked awful, and in this picture, he may look homeless, but we got to give him a matchup. He needs to go back to jiu-jitsu and take on Mikey Musumeci at a UFC Invitational. Because I think it's time for the jiu-jitsu community to also show the evolution. And Musumeci's game is more 2024 than Kron Gracie's game, which is more 2014. Let's be real. Kron Gracie's prime in jiu-jitsu was like 12 years ago. Mikey Musumeci is a talent right now, and he's got sensational jiu-jitsu skills, and I think that he would tap Kron Gracie out, and I actually really would want to see it. If there is any grappling match that's got my attention, it's this one. Let's see the UFC set this up because the Fight Pass Invitational is a big possibility. Musumeci's under contract with the UFC to do grappling events for them. Kron Gracie, a UFC fighter, easy to make happen. Definitely has a bit of hype behind it. And Kron Gracie, I mean, he just got beaten MMA. And the tactics were ineffective. And I think, honestly, Musumeci will sub him up as well. So I think that the UFC should consider setting up a special grappling matchup between these two. I hope that it comes to fruition between Kron Gracie and Mikey Musumeci. And I think Musumeci's a lock if they tie up in 2025. Now, I'm doing a lot. I'm giving you guys plenty of matchups. I'm not cutting anybody short, okay? Dom Reyes, Bogdan Guchkov, and Johnny Walker winner. Simple. Reyes beat Anthony Smith. Bogdan Guchkov looks like Anthony Smith and has a chance to avenge Smith if he can get past Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker has a decision win over Anthony Smith. I feel like the winner of this fight between Guchkov and Walker should probably take on Reyes because, both have shown flaws as far as like the highest level of the game. They're not going to win. right? We saw, Magomed Ankalaev wreck Johnny Walker. We saw Volkan Ozdemir wreck Johnny Walker. Obviously, we saw Bogdan Gushkov also get wrecked by Volkan Ozdemir. And then you look at, Dom Reyes. He's on a 2-fight win streak, 2 finishes in a row. He fought John Jones and gave him hell. At one point, he was a title challenger, I guess 2-time title challenger if you include the Blachowicz fight. Why not try and give Dominic Reyes a chance to emerge again? And I think the, fight between either Johnny Walker and Reyes or Gushkov and Reyes is actually pretty dope. Reyes being a quick southpaw. I'm imagining Reyes getting chinned against Bogdan Gushkov and maybe has a better chance with Johnny Walker because of Johnny Walker's chin issues. But either one of these guys could dust Reyes. And on the flip side, though, Reyes definitely has the punch and speed to catch either one of these guys with big shots, too. But I won't lie to you. I definitely favor the fighters on, I guess, is it my right, your left, or is it my left? I guess technically it's my left. My left from right's tricky doing this video, man. The guys over here, these guys right here, I'll probably favor him over Reyes. I don't know, though. Dom Reyes still got some good hand speed. And he whooped Anthony Smith. I know he, got some flack. He looked slow, whatever, but I don't think he looked that bad, to be honest. He handled Smith with ease. Johnny Walker didn't finish Smith. So I think Reyes is in the mix again. And I think the winner of these two versus Reyes, count me in. I honestly don't know my pick yet between these two. I kind of feel like I might favor Gushkov because Walker's ass chin. But, for Reyes, better world would probably be him going out there and fighting Johnny Walker, who has a more obvious hole. Now, Movsar Evloev, he fights on the prelims, but he beat Aljamain Sterling, the former bantamweight champion. Like, he might be getting disregarded a bit by, the UFC being on the prelims. But he said himself he didn't care. He got a lot of eyes. And he beat Aljo in a competitive fight. Listen. Diego Lopez and Movsar. I know the fans might hate it. I can see you guys in the comments. Nah, he don't deserve that. Bro, Movsar beat Diego Lopez, though. Wouldn't Lopez want to avenge his only UFC loss? I know Diego Lopez called out Volkanovski with Topuria talking about going to 155, but chill. Don't believe the hype. I know Topuria is talking about going to 155. I doubt it's happening in 2025. Or if it does, it's the very end. It's not his next fight. He's going to defend the featherweight belt again. And Movsar Evloev versus Diego Lopez would be the truest essence of a number one contender fight. You now allow Diego Lopez a full camp to prepare for Movsar. Movsar having some difficulty on the ground with Aljo. I think that Diego Lopez definitely has a boxing advantage over Movsar. It's a winnable fight for sure for either guy. And I get it. The hype on Lopez is higher, but you have to respect the undefeated record of Movsar, the fact that he already beat Diego Lopez once, and add on top of that, he also beat Aljamain Sterling, the former bantamweight champ, who, yes, is one of the most undercredited champs ever and constantly trolled champs, but still an elite caliber grappler. I want to see the rematch. I want to see both guys preparing for one another and what will happen on a full camp. And honestly, I'd like to see 5 rounds. A 5-round true number one contender fight between two of the best up-and-coming talents in the UFC featherweight division. I hope the UFC decides to book this. Now, I could see them trying to keep Lopez away from Movsar and avoiding the rematch because of Movsar not being a great finisher, maybe isn't as much in the favor of the UFC with the, style of competitive matchups that tend to happen between him. But man, does he not kind of deserve it? Like, who's he going to fight instead? We're going to do Movsar versus Yair Rodriguez? We're going to do Movsar versus Brian Ortega? The only way this fight shouldn't be next is if Diego Lopez is indeed going to be fighting Volkanovski and Topuria is 100% moving up in weight. Then sure, throw a monkey wrench in this plan and things can change. But I think as far as deserving matchups, fighting the next best guy up is the best way to produce the highest level of contender. I understand the fan side would be like, no, we want to see Lopez Topuria right now. Granted, if they want to give Lopez the title shot now and the Volkanovski fight isn't happening, sure, I could see them doing that instead. But if Lopez is waiting around, I could see them saying, hey, let's do one more. Let's do you and Movsar, the truest form of a number one contender fight, and let's do it 5 rounds. And it's a sick fight night main event. It's a co-feature. That's a 5-round fight on a pay-per-view. There's lots of things you can do between both these guys. And regardless of, the potential lower hype of Movzar, he has a win over Diego Lopez that I'm sure Lopez would want to avenge. And I've gone back and forth on Twitter before. So I don't know. I think maybe it's a possibility. I like the fight. Okay, I do. Now, next up, this is going to be the most obscure one. Some of you guys might be like, why are you matching Clay Guida with somebody? Shouldn't he retire? No. There is one last dance for Clay Guida. There is one final fight for Clay Guida that we need to see. Tony Ferguson, Clay Guida. Can we just do it? Please? Tony Ferguson, Clay Guida. Let's do it at 170. They don't have to cut weight. Let's give Tony a chance to go out with a win against Clay Guida, and honestly, give Clay Guida a chance to go out with a win as well. Either one of these guys can win the fight. For Clay Guida, it would be cool to get a win over the former interim champ and the boogeyman at the time that Clay was at lightweight and featherweight. He was around those weight classes, right? Fighting in the UFC when friggin' Ferguson was the man. On the opposite front, it's a fight that Tony might have a chance winning. He's a lot slower, though, on the feet. I think Clay Guida is better at boxing than Tony Ferguson in 2024, especially 2025. I think Clay Guida could potentially out-wrestle Tony Ferguson, but Tony could be live to use his jiu-jitsu and catch Clay Guida in something. Now, the UFC might be hesitant to book this because they are so worried about Ferguson somehow winning and saying, I'm not retiring, give me more fights. But I don't know, man. I think just make this happen. Just do it. Why not? Let me know in the comments. You want to see it, right? You're curious too. Come on, stop. Don't lie to me. We want to see this fight. UFC, book Clay Guida versus Tony Ferguson, please. And we got one more, and this is more of a legit matchup. Bryan Battle versus Vicente Luque. They both won on this card. We got Luque holding on to his spot in the top 15. We got Bryan Battle, who's real close to it. I get it. He was underwhelming, and I get it. He could be penalized and end up not having a chance to fight in the top 15 or even, his next fight at welterweight if the UFC wants to be that stiff about him missing weight by 4 pounds. But kind of makes sense, man. Bryan Battle coming up, beats Randy Brown. A competitive fight for sure. Split decision, flawed fight. People thought he lost. Luque absolutely exposing Temba Garimbo and subbing him after rocking him with relative ease and maybe showing he's not completely washed. I like this fight between him and Battle too because I think Luque is going to have a hard time keeping Battle off of him. Say what you want about Randy Brown. He's got quick hands. I would say his hands from distance are a lot quicker and slicker than Luque, though I'd say Luque has a bit more of like true stinging punching power, and Luque's got better kicks. I don't know, man. The style for Luque might be difficult here with Bryan Battle, who's a pretty big welterweight, who's primed for sure. It's easy to hate on him because of a subpar performance against Randy Brown, but I don't think that's the best Bryan Battle has to offer, and I hope that the UFC decides to make a fun fight to give Bryan Battle a chance into the top 15, but also, it's the right matchup for Luque. Let's see if he can expose another up-and-coming contender. Bryan Battle, Vicente Luque. Both guys fought the same night. They should both be ready to turn around relatively soon. I'm not saying next week, but I don't think Bryan Battle took too much damage in his 3-round fight with Randy Brown, and we know for a fact that Luque took no damage against Temba Garimbo. I like the idea of Luque having to defend his spot. I think that makes sense. Now, Luque called out Masvidal. He's reaching for the stars. I don't think Luque is getting Masvidal. But maybe. It wouldn't be insane. I don't hate Luque versus Masvidal because I think Masvidal would actually have a chance to knock him out. Then for Bryan Battle, sorry, man. The UFC will book you something else, man. You might not be getting a top 15 fight, to be honest. I know he talked about he wanted to fight Carlos Prates. Bryan Battle, I'm a fan. Don't do that. Don't fight Carlos Prates. It's a really bad idea. Really bad idea. Those are the matches to make after UFC 310. I told you guys I would follow through and I would bring this series back, and I do hope that you guys enjoyed it. I always enjoy doing the every fights to make next videos. Just sometimes they get lost in the normal content schedule that I got going. But this week I made it a priority. You guys asked for it. I delivered it. Smash the like button if you guys are new. Subscribe. Thank you guys for watching, and please let me know. What do you rate the matches? Do you agree with my matches to make next, or you disagree? You think that the UFC is not calling me for a matchmaker job anytime soon? I think they are. I think they're calling me right now, bro. I'm getting a phone call. Thanks, guys. I'll see you all on the next one. Enjoy it. Peace out. Bye-bye.